Good day, everyone. I'm Karen Leander, and today I'll be discussing Chapter 12 Supply Chain Management of our subject Advanced Production and Operations Management. At the end of my presentation, the students will be able to number one, explain the importance of supply chain, number two, identify supply chain strategies, number three, explain major issues in logistics management. And number four, describe the steps in vendor selection. First, let us define supply chain. A supply chain is the sequence of organizations, their facilities, functions, and activities that are involved in producing and delivering a product or service. The sequence begins with basic suppliers of raw materials and extends all the way to the final customer. Facilities includes warehouses, factories, processing centers, distribution centers, retail outlets, and offices. Functions and activities includes forecasting, purchasing, inventory management, information management, quality assurance, scheduling, production, distribution, delivery, and customer service. On the other hand, supply chain management is the strategic coordination of business functions within a business organization and throughout its supply chain for the purpose of integrating supply and demand management. Supply chain managers are people at various levels of organization who are responsible for managing supply and demand both within and across business organizations. They are involved with planning and coordinating activities that include sourcing and procurement of materials and services, transformation activities, and logistics. Lastly, logistics is the part of a supply chain involved with forward and reverse flow of goods, services, cash, and information. Logistic management includes management of inbound and outbound transportation, material handling, warehousing, inventory, order fulfillment, and distribution. Third party logistics and reverse logistics. Reverse logistics involves return of goods from customers. All of this will be discussed in my presentation. Supply chains are sometimes referred to as value chains, a term that reflects the concept that value is added as goods and services progress through the chain. Supply or value chains typically comprise separate business organizations rather than just a single organization. Moreover, the supply or value chain has two components for each organization. There is supply component and demand component. The supply component starts at the beginning of the chain and with the internal operations of the organization. The demand component of the chain starts at the point where the organization's output is delivered to its immediate customer and ends with the final customer in the chain. The demand chain, on the other hand, is the sales and distribution portion of the value chain. The length of each component depends on where a particular organization is in the chain. The closer the organization is to the final customer, the shorter its demand component, and the longer its supply component. So, why is supply chain important in an organization or in a company? Supply chains are the lifeblood of any business organization. They connect suppliers and producers and final customers in a network that is essential to the creation of delivery of goods and services. Managing the supply chain is the process of planning, implementing, and controlling supply chain operations. So the basic components are strategy, procurement, supply management, demand management, and logistics. The goal of supply chain management is to match supply to demand as effectively and as efficiently as possible. So there is an alignment of supply and demand if we implement supply chain management. So, what are the key aspects that are related to supply chain? First is determining the appropriate level of outsourcing, managing procurement, managing suppliers, managing customer relationships, and being able to quickly identify problems and respond to them. So, again, throughout my presentation, this will all be discussed. An important aspect of supply chain management is flow management. There are three types of flow that need to be managed are product and service flow, information flow, and financial flow. So these are the three types of flow management in a supply chain. So within the supply chain, these three can be noticed or can be seen. Product and information flow involves the movement of goods or services from suppliers to customer, as well as handling customer service needs and product returns. On the other hand, information flow involves sharing forecast and sales data, transmitting orders, tracking shipments, and updating order status. Financial flow involves term, credit terms, payments and consignments, and title ownership arrangements. So now I'm showing you some examples of typical supply chains. So as shown in this slide, two examples are shown. So letter A is for the manufacturing supply chain, which is in the upper part, and for services supply chain on the bottom part. Typical manufacturing supply chain involves suppliers of raw materials. Upon receiving the raw mats, they will be stored, of course, in a storage. And then next will be the production or manufacturing of goods. It will be again stored temporarily until it is ready for distribution to market or retailer. From the market, the customer can now purchase the goods. A typical supply chain is much shorter on the other hand. Suppliers are also involved for provision of supplies involved in the service. So for example, you have a salon services. They need, of course, supplies for such as shampoo, conditioner, hair color products, etc. After purchasing the supplies, they have to store it until it is needed in the service to be rendered to the customers. We should note that transportation of supplies is involved in both supply chains. So again, this is another example of supply chain, a little more detailed or rather complex. The sample show how goods and services, including cash flow, moves through suppliers, production, logistics, customers, and reverse logistics. As you can see, goods and services flow clockwise in this diagram, represented by the red arrows, while cash flows represent counterclockwise. Hence, the reverse logistics represented by the green arrows. Information flows in both direction. So this supply chain is similar to a tree with branches that have side branches. As you can see at the right side, it has a branch. Ultimately, research and design influence goods and services. Companies take time to analyze consumers' demands to have a supply and demand alignment. Marketing strategy and product customization will now be involved in the provision of goods and services in the supplier and production to achieve this. So, this is where demand and supply alignment comes from the branch at the right. So, now for a better appreciation of supply chain management, I included the supply chain operations reference or the SCORE model. It is a framework for understanding the scope of supply chain management that is based on five basic functions involved in managing a supply chain. So these functions are plan, source, make, deliver, and return, which are the key processes that create value to customers. These processes include many of the operation management functions, such as measurement, strategy, forecasting, capacity management, and inventory management, scheduling, and quality management. The unique characteristic of SCORE is that whereas managers typically focus on activities within the span of their purchasing, manufacturing, and distribution processes, SCORE requires a clear understanding of interaction among all parts of the system. So everyone is involved in this type of model, in this system. So we can now understand what each player in the supply chain is playing. What are their roles in the supply chain? The SCORE framework can also help managers identify important performance metrics to manage and monitor their processes. So as you can see in the table, these are the basic functions in the supply chain. So for plan, they are involved in management policies, aligning the supply chain with financial plan. This is what I'm stressing earlier as well. So while source, the source function is this is where identifying and selecting suppliers, scheduling delivers, authorizing payments, and managing inventory evolves. On the next function is make. This involves and includes production scheduling, managing work in process, manufacturing testing, packaging, and product release. For deliver, this entails order management activities such as processing customer orders, to routing shipments, managing goods, to distribution centers, and invoicing the customer. Of course, we cannot satisfy every customer, so return is also involved in our supply chain. So this processing customer returns is by providing maintenance, repair, and overhaul and dealing with excess goods. So this includes authorization, receiving, verification, disposition, replacement, or credit. A supply chain is an integrated system of processes that requires much consideration and collaboration among its various players, as I've mentioned earlier. Every company is part of a long chain, in fact, many long chains, of customers and suppliers. So each company is a customer to its suppliers and a supplier to its customer. So it does not make sense to think of a company as only one or the other. This promotes the system perspectives of supply chain rather than viewing organization as disconnected from other elements of the supply chain. So as you can see in this slide, in Exhibit 13.1, this illustrates how the SCORE model may be used in a chain of customer-supplier relationships. So each major player, you can see the company, its suppliers, its customers, and its suppliers. So they're at the side. Your company is in the middle. Would typically manage its own supply chain using the SCORE framework. In essence, chaining these functions within a broader supply chain. So as you can see, planning is on top. So everyone is involved in planning. So again, your company is in the middle. They have the source function, make, deliver, return, and return. As you can see, as the chain expands, the function becomes smaller. For the suppliers, it only since they are the origin of the supply, they are only involved in delivery and returns. While for the supplier, your direct supplier and your company have almost the same function. Same with customer. While the customer's customer or the end user of the product, again, they only have two function, which is the source and return. So again, this involves the SCORE framework. So this is how it works in detail. Although different industries and different businesses vary wildly in terms of where they are in the evolution of their supply chain management, many businesses emphasize the following as their strategies. So now let's talk about this supply chain strategies. First is measuring supply chain ROI. Next is greening the supply chain. Third is reevaluating the outsourcing. Fourth is integrating information technology or IT. Fifth, managing risks. Six, adopting lean principles. And seven, being agile. So these are some strategies. And let us define these strategies in the following slides. Okay, so the first is measuring supply chain ROI. So what is this? What's strategy is this. This enable managers to incorporate economics into outsourcing and other decisions, giving them a rational basis for managing their supply chains. So they have to have a measurement of their ROI so they can see if they can still move or eliminate some processes as they go along. Next is screening the supply chain. This strategy is generating interest for a variety of reasons, so including corporate responsibility, regulations, and of course public pressure, since there are many NGOs now and many organizations that promotes the environment, the promotion of good environment and helping the environment rather. This may involve redesigning products and services, reducing packaging, near sourcing to reduce pollution and carbon footprint from transportation, choosing green suppliers, managing returns, and implementing end of life programs, particularly for appliances and electronic equipment. So that's the strategy for those company who wants to be more environmental friendly. Another strategy is reevaluating outsourcing. So this is another good strategy that's very popular nowadays, especially to global suppliers. Business organization outsource for a variety of reasons. Often decisions to outsource have been based on lower prices resulting from, of course, lower labor costs. Other potential benefits include the ability to focus on core strength, converting fixed cost to variable cost, freeing up capital to devote to other needs, shifting some risks to suppliers, and taking advantage of suppliers' expertise and ease of expansion outside the home country. So we can now notice this. If a company that is not an expert in building some raw materials, so they rather outsource it than to train someone or hire someone to do it. Even in services, in people, most people now outsource for the labor market rather than train them. In integrating information technology, this strategy with a company can produce real-time data that can enhance strategic planning and help business to control costs, measure quality and productivity, respond quickly to problems, and improve supply chain operations. So this is why ERP or enterprise resource planning are so important to supply chains. So ERP is a software used by companies to manage key parts of operations such as accounting and resource management. So now even in value chain they are using ERP. So the transmission of data is real time and more manageable. Another strategy is managing risks. For some businesses, the supply chain is a major source of risk, so it is essential to adopt procedures for managing risk. This involves identifying risk, assessing their likelihood of occurring and their potential impact, and then developing strategies for addressing those risks. So, as for some people, if you're familiar with the new ISO 9001 2015, before it's just a simple QMS, but now they also involve risk-based management. So, as they know, risk assessing risk and addressing the risk before it occurs is very important in an organization. Next is adopting lean principles. Many businesses are turning to lean principles to improve the performance of their supply chain. So, in too many instances, traditional supply chains are a collection of loosely connected steps, and business processes are not linked to suppliers or customers' needs. So, by applying these principles to supply chains, can overcome this weakness by eliminating non-value added processes, improving product flow by using pull systems rather than push systems, using fewer suppliers and supplier certification programs, which will be discussed later, which can nearly eliminate the need for an inspection for incoming goods, and adopting the lean attitude of never ceasing to improve the system. Lastly, the last strategy is being agile. In our VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex means that supply chain is should be flexible enough and to be able to respond fairly quickly to unpredictable changes or circumstances such as supplier production or quality issues, weather disruptions, changing demands, transportation issues, and political issues now. In the time of pandemic, even health issues can affect our businesses. As a result of this and current and possible future trends, organizations are likely to give serious thought to reconfigure their supply chains to reduce risk and improve flow, increase profits, and generally increase customer satisfaction. So, also us in the government, in DTI, we also promote what we call business resiliency among our entrepreneurs so they can be agile to whatever risk or unfortunate things that happen in the organization, whether it's natural or man-made disasters, they are ready to face those challenges. So being agile is important. So moving on now, let me discuss about logistics. So again, as mentioned earlier, this is the movement of materials such as movement of materials, services, cash, and information in a supply chain. Materials includes physical items used in production processes. So even raw materials are involved in logistics. So in addition, work in process, there are support items such as fuels, equipments, parts, tool, lubricants, office supplies, and more. Even the supplies are included in logistics. Logistics also includes movement within a facility, overseeing incoming and outgoing shipments of goods and materials, and information flow throughout the supply chain. So now this is the example. The movement of goods within a manufacturing facility is part of production control. The figure in this slide shows many steps where materials move within a manufacturing facility. So this is just within the facility. Number one, of course, is from the incoming vehicles to receiving the product. From receiving the from receiving to storage. Then third, from storage to the point of use. For example, here in the work center. From one work center, it can be moved to the next work center or a temporary storage, depending on what product you are processing. From the last operation to the final storage, and then lastly, from storage to shipping and then shipping to outgoing vehicles. So, for instance, you are manufacturing banana chips. So, from the receiving area, receiving raw materials of your, of course, the banana, the cooking oil, the sugar, and other supplies or raw materials that we use for cooking the banana chips. So, first, the work center, of course, is the clean station or the cleaning station. Of course, we have to wash the banana so as the sanitation is maintained. And then after that, they can be now transferred to a machine so it can be sliced. And then after that, they can now, the processing of cooking will now be involved. And then when the banana chips are cooked and cooled, they can now be transferred to a storage readying for another work center for packaging of raw materials. I mean, rather, packaging of the cooked banana chips. And then it will now be transferred to another work center for perhaps quality control or putting stickers and label or transferring into the box and then ready for storage for now delivery and distribution to market. In some instances, the goods being moved are supplies. In other, in other, the goods are actual products or partially completed products. And still, in other instances, the goods are raw materials or purchase parts. So again, it depends on what are you producing. Is it a part of a raw material for another product, and so on. Movement of materials must be coordinated to arrive at the appropriate destinations at appropriate times. Workers and supervisor must take care so that items are not lost, stolen, damaged, or during movement. So, Now, let us discuss risks and issues. Risks in domestic supply chains are often minimal. However, risks in global chain supply chain are much greater. This include production problems with suppliers that result in material shortages, labor strikes, unexpected transportation delays, delays from inspection or port operations, political instability in foreign countries like what we're experiencing now in Ukraine and Russia. Natural disasters. This is not new to us since our country is always visited by typhoons and even terrorism. In this slide, it is shown that shown are the short and long-term issues and risks that logistics may face and ways by which they can be mitigated. So here are some examples. One identified issue is the transportation costs. We know that some transportation costs can add up 10% of the total cost of the product as it moves through the supply chain. So every movement it has a corresponding cost in the transportation. On the other hand, weather disturbances can also disrupt logistics. This is very true again in our country. So for example, weather can disrupt maritime shipments, and this mode requires high initial investments. They are slow but inexpensive from a unit cost basis since we are shipping in the maritime in bulk, not per piece. Like air, they require other modes of transportation to get to customers' locations. So to mitigate this, a company may hire new and or multiple contract manufacturer and supplier. Partnerships with local transportation firms would also be of great help if in case your international transport is not available. And having an emergency and or backup plans to ship by air, truck, ship or rail by an alternative shipper. So again, we should always have a plan, a backup plan or a risk-based plan to address or to mitigate these risks. With the risks discussed, reliable and trustworthy suppliers are a vital link in an effective supply chain. Timely deliveries of goods or services and high quality are just two of the ways that supplier can contribute to effective operations. A purchasing manager may function as an external operations manager, working with suppliers to coordinate suppliers' operations and buyers' needs. So, in this section, various aspects of supplier management are described. So, here are the six. So, including supplier audit, supplier certification, and so on. The slide starts with an aspect that can have an important ramification for entire organization, which is choosing suppliers. In many respects, choosing a vendor or supplier involves taking into account many of the same factors associated with the making a major purchase. A company may consider price, quality, the supplier's reputation, past experience with the supplier, and service after the sale. The main difference is that a company, because of the quantities it orders and operations requirements, often provide suppliers with detailed specification of materials or parts it wants to it wants instead of buying items off the shelf. Of course, there are different specification and some items should be fabricated in accordance to the specification of a company. Although most of organizations buy standard items that way. The main factors a company takes into account is when it selects a vendor are outlined in table show. So these are the factors, some of the factors how companies choose suppliers. Because different factors are important for different situation, purchasing must decide with the help of operation the importance of each factor. For example, they are using a score method or a weight method for each factor. Because maybe some company location is weighs more than having the flexibility because maybe location is much more having a good location for a supplier is more is much a good strategy than having it be more flexible and so on. Of course, they give rate to potential vendors according on how well they can be expected perform against this list. And this process is called vendor analysis. It is conducted periodically or whenever there is a significant change in the weighing assigned to the various factors. So again, these are some of the factors that can be considered in choosing suppliers, and these are the guide questions that you can ask. So to highlight, vendor analysis is evaluating the sources of supply in terms of price, quality, reputation, and service. Another aspect of supplier management is, of course, supplier audit. So, as mentioned, periodic audits of suppliers are a means of keeping current suppliers' production or service capabilities, quality, and delivery problems and resolutions, and suppliers' performance on the criteria. If an audit reveals problem areas, a buyer can attempt to find solution before a more serious problems develop. That's why it's important to audit also as well your supplier. Among factors typically covered by a supplier audit are management style, quality assurance, materials management, design process use, design improvement policies, and procedures for corrective action and follow up. Supplier audits are also important first step in supplier certification program, which will be discussed next. So yeah, supplier certification. And on the other hand, this involves a detailed examination of the qualities and capabilities of a supplier. The certification process verifies that the supplier meets or exceeds the requirements of a buyer. This is generally important in supplier relationships, but it is particularly important when the buyer is seeking to establish a long term relationship with suppliers. So, if you're a certified supplier, you are sometimes referred to as a world class supplier. One of the advantages in certifying suppliers is that a buyer can eliminate much or if not all the inspection and testing of delivered goods. So the process is much shorter if you are already a certified supplier. And although problems with supplier goods or services might not be totally eliminated, there is much risk, less risk than with non-certified suppliers. Rather than develop their own certification programs, some companies rely on the standard industry certifications such as ISO 9000. This is what also we use in our office. We are ISO certified, and one of the standards there is having a certification or evaluation of suppliers. Perhaps again, this is the most widely used international certification. So instead of creating your own certification, why not just follow or the standards of the ISO? Purchasing has the ultimate responsibility for establishing and maintaining good supplier relationships. So the type of relationship is often related to the length of contract between buyers and sellers. Business organizations are becoming increasingly aware of the importance of building good relationship with their suppliers. In the past, too many firms regarded their suppliers as adversaries and dealt them on that basis. Keeping good relations with suppliers is increasingly recognized as an important factor in maintaining competitive edge. Many companies are adopting a view of suppliers as partners. This viewpoint stresses a stable relationship with relatively few reliable suppliers who can provide high quality supplies. Maintain a precise delivery schedules and flexible relative to changes in production specification and delivery schedules. So, how will a company know if the supplier is an adversary or a partner? As you can see in the slide, it shows a comparison of the contrasting views of suppliers. As you can see here, you should be guided. So, for example, the aspect is a low price. So, if you consider your partner as an adversary, so it can be a major consideration for you. But if you see your supplier as partner, it's just moderately important. For reliability, as an adversary, he may not the supplier may not be that high. But if you see your supplier as your partner, of course, he is very, very reliable, and so on. Supplier partnership. So more and more business organizations are seeking to establish partnerships with other organizations in their business supply chains. This implies fewer suppliers in long-term relationship, sharing of information, and cooperation in planning. Of course, the benefits, if you have a good supplier partnership, you have higher quality, increased delivery speed and reliability, lower inventories, lower costs, higher profits, and in general, improved operations. But still, there are a number of obstacles to supplier partnership, not the least of which that has many, is that because many of the benefits go to the buyer, so suppliers may be hesitant to enter in such relationship. Supplier may have to increase their investment in equipment, which may have a strain on cash flow. Another possibility is that the cultures of the buyer and supplier might be quite different and not lend themselves to such an arrangement. So that's the hindrance of having a partnership. Lastly, strategic partnering. This occurs when two or more business organizations have a complementary products or services that would strategically benefit the others. Agree to join so that each may realize a strategic benefit. One way this occurs is when a supplier agrees to hold inventory for a customer, thereby reducing the customer's cost of holding the inventory in exchange for the customers agreeing to a long term commitment, thereby relieving the supplier of the cost that would be needed to continually find new customers, negoti- negotiate prices and services, and so in closing, I'll showing you the SMART framework for an additional and effective supply chain management. So you can see SMART stands for define your strategy, establish metrics, align your organization, re-engineer, redesign process, and use technology. So let me discuss. First is always define your strategy or strategies. These strategies will help a company achieve its goals, maximize profits, enhance productivity, provide quality service or product or service, and ensuring customer satisfaction. Next is establish metrics. So your company will have a way to measure its performance. Why? As they say, you cannot measure. What you cannot measure cannot be managed. And when you cannot manage, you cannot play. Company must always have a way to measure its supply chain management process to improve, eliminate waste, reduce lead time, and reduce total cost. So next is aligning your organization. So every company should develop and align an ethical supply chain code to guide behavior. A code should cover behavior that involves customers, suppliers' behaviors, contract negotiation, recruiting, and the environmental issues that's discussed earlier. A major risk of unethical behavior is that when such behavior is exposed in the media, consumers tend to blame the major company or brand in the supply chain associated with the ethical infractions that were actually committed by legally independent companies in the supply chain. So it is important that all the stakeholders involved your supply chains are aligned with your company or your beliefs and ethical beliefs. Constant reengineering or reviewing the supply chain process is again essential. With the whole team, companies must identify or brainstorm strategies that will contribute to the smooth delivery of product or service. Again, make a plan to carry out and deliver the changes required to enhance product or service further, thereby meeting financial objectives as well. So lastly, technology makes our life easier. With integration of technology like using a software in supply chain management, it will be able to coordinate, monitor, and manage a supply chain. This will serve as an integrated system that provides for system wide visibility of key activities and events in areas such as supplier relationships, performance management, sales and order fulfillment, and again, maintaining customer and supplier relationships. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you were able to learn about supply chain management. Thank you and God bless us all.